At holiday lunch, Mom told me to leave and stop relying on the family. I quietly packed, then announced they'd lost every financial benefit I provided. Her face went blank, the words hung in the air like shattered glass, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. My mother stood at the head of the dining table, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing toward the front door as if I were some unwanted guest who'd overstayed their welcome. The turkey sat half-carved on the antique serving platter, steam still rising from its golden skin, while my family watched the scene unfold with varying degrees of discomfort and poorly concealed satisfaction. "Maybe it's time you stop relying on this family and learn to stand on your own 2 feet," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected over the years, equal parts disappointment and disdain. "We've all been talking, and we think you need to be more independent." I felt my sister Natalie smirk from across the table, her husband Craig nodding along like the dutiful supporter he'd always been. Their twin daughters, barely 13, stared at their plates with the uncomfortable awareness that something significant was happening, even if they couldn't quite grasp what. My brother Tyler maintained his usual neutral expression, though his wife Ashley reached under the table to squeeze his hand, her eyes darting between my mother and me. The dining room suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in despite the vaulted ceilings and expensive crown molding. Every detail seemed sharper, the crystal chandelier casting prismatic light across the white linen tablecloth, the scent of sage and thyme from the stuffing, the distant sound of a football game playing on the television in my father's study where he'd conveniently disappeared 20 minutes earlier. "Relying on the family," I repeated, tasting the words, letting them settle. "Is that what you think I've been doing?" My mother's jaw tightened. She'd expected tears, probably. Maybe an argument or a defensive outburst. That's how these confrontations usually went. She'd make some cutting remark, I'd react emotionally, and then she'd use my response as further evidence of my instability or immaturity. The script had been written years ago, and we'd both played our parts faithfully. But something shifted in that moment. Maybe it was the way Natalie couldn't quite hide her triumphant smile, or how my mother's sister Diane watched with barely disguised glee, or the realization that this intervention had been planned, discussed, and decided without any input from me. They'd gathered for Thanksgiving with the express purpose of putting me in my place, of reminding me where I stood in the family hierarchy. "You know what?" I set my napkin beside my plate with deliberate care. "You're absolutely right. I should be more independent." My mother blinked, momentarily thrown by my agreement. "Well, good. I'm glad you're finally seeing reason." "I'll just go pack my things and head out," I continued, pushing back from the table. "Give you all a chance to enjoy the holiday without me being such a burden." Natalie exchanged a glance with my mother, uncertainty flickering across her features. This was going too smoothly. The performance required more resistance, more drama. My compliance disrupted the narrative they'd constructed. I walked upstairs to the guest room where I'd stayed for the long weekend, my footsteps echoing in the hardwood hallway. The room was decorated in my mother's signature style, elegant, expensive, and utterly impersonal. I'd slept in this bed countless times over the years, during visits home from college, after my divorce 3 years ago when I'd needed a temporary place to regroup, during holidays and family celebrations. The dresser held a few of my clothes, the nightstand a book I'd been reading, the bathroom counter my toiletries arranged in a neat row. 20 minutes. That's all it took to erase any evidence of my presence. Clothes folded into my suitcase, toiletries zipped into a bag, phone charger wrapped and tucked away. I moved with methodical efficiency, my mind strangely clear despite the hurricane of emotions churning beneath the surface. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they were all there, but underneath ran a current of something else. Liberation, maybe. Or just exhaustion from playing a role that had never quite fit. I carried my suitcase downstairs, the wheels thumping against each step. The dining room conversation had resumed, voices carefully avoiding any mention of the confrontation that had just occurred. My mother was telling some story about the country club, her laugh a little too bright, a little too forced. Natalie contributed supportive comments at appropriate intervals while Craig checked his phone under the table. They looked up when I appeared in the doorway, suitcase in hand. "Leaving so soon?" My mother's tone suggested polite surprise, as if I hadn't just been told to go. "You said I should be more independent," I replied evenly. "So I'm starting now. There's no need to be dramatic about it. We can discuss this after dinner like civilized people." Actually, there is something I need to tell you all before I go. I set my suitcase down and pulled out my phone, pulling up the Notes app where I'd been tracking some numbers. Since you're all concerned about me relying on the family, I wanted to give you a heads up about some changes I'll be making. My father had emerged from his study, drawn by the shift in energy. He stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching with his usual detached curiosity. Tyler and Ashley had gone completely still, while Aunt Diane leaned forward in her chair with undisguised interest. First, about the house. I gestured vaguely at our surroundings, my parents' sprawling colonial in an exclusive suburb where every lawn was professionally maintained and every home commanded prices in the multiple millions. I've been covering the property taxes for the last 4 years. That's about $68,000 annually. Since I'm learning to be more independent, I'll be discontinuing those payments immediately. My mother's face went blank. Completely, utterly blank. The color drained so quickly I worried she might faint. You can expect a bill for this year's amount in April, I continued, consulting my notes. I believe the exact figure is $67,843. I paid last year's in full, so you've got a few months to figure out the budget. What are you talking about? Natalie's voice cracked slightly. You've been paying the property taxes? Among other things. I scrolled through my phone, finding the documentation I'd meticulously maintained. Dad's country club membership runs about $32,000 a year. I've been covering that for the past 5 years. The fees for the golf club, the social membership, the dining privileges, all of it. That'll be ending as well. My father's expression finally shifted, his jaw tightening as the implications sank in. Then there's the trust fund for the twins, I said, nodding toward Natalie's daughters. I set it up when they were born with a substantial initial investment, and I've been contributing $5,000 monthly for their college education since they turned 5. That's $60,000 a year for the past 8 years. With the original investment and compound interest, that account is sitting at around $915,000 right now. Natalie stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's my daughter's money. Actually, it's my money that I chose to invest in their future. And since I'm such a burden who relies on this family, I think I'll redirect those funds toward my own independence. I made a show of typing on my phone. I'll have my financial advisor close the account on Monday. You can't do that. Natalie's voice climbed toward hysteria. I absolutely can. The account is in my name, designated for their benefit. But there's no legal obligation for me to maintain it. I looked at my mother, whose blank expression had transformed into something between shock and rage. There's also the matter of your retirement account. After Dad's investment firm went under during the recession, you were facing some serious shortfalls. I've been supplementing your retirement to the tune of about $45,000 annually for the last 8 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Aunt Diane had gone quiet, her earlier glee evaporating as she calculated what this meant. That's $360,000 I've contributed to ensure you can maintain your lifestyle, I continued. The monthly payments will stop at the end of this month. I suggest you talk to a financial planner about adjusting your budget accordingly. My mother finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You've been. All this time? Yes. All this time. I tucked my phone back into my pocket. There's more, but those are the big items. The quarterly insurance premiums for the beach house, the maintenance fees for the timeshare in Aspen, the subscription services you all use under my family plan, all of it goes away when I start being more independent. Tyler spoke for the first time since I'd returned downstairs. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would it have mattered? I met his gaze steadily. When have any of you asked about my life, my work, what I do? You all assumed I was struggling because I got divorced, because I don't have children, because I chose a career path that didn't involve marriage to someone successful. You saw what you wanted to see. My mother gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. This is absurd. If you've been paying all these things, why would you let us think that I was the failure? I finished for her. Because you needed someone to look down on. Natalie needed to feel superior with her perfect family. Tyler needed someone whose life looked messier than his marriage. Dad needed a daughter who wasn't as successful as his business failures. And you needed a project, someone to fix and improve and manage. I picked up my suitcase handle, the wheels clicking into place. I make $475,000 a year in salary alone, I said quietly. I started my software company 9 years ago, and it's been profitable since year 2. The company went public 18 months ago, and I own 7% of the stock, which is currently valued at around $12 million. I have a condo in the city worth $1.8 million that I own outright, a retirement account that could support me comfortably for the rest of my life, and more job offers than I know what to do with. I've been financially independent and successful for nearly a decade while quietly making sure this family maintained the lifestyle you'd all grown accustomed to. Natalie sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Craig stared at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head. Ashley covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with understanding of exactly how badly this had gone wrong. But you're right, Mom. I should stop relying on the family. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. So I'll stop relying on family dinners to make me feel small. I'll stop relying on family gatherings to remind me I'm not good enough. I'll stop relying on the hope that someday you might actually be proud of me instead of just tolerating my presence. My mother's blank expression cracked, something desperate flickering beneath. Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't. I pulled the handle of my suitcase, the wheels beginning to roll across the hardwood. I understand perfectly. You wanted me to be more independent, and now I will be. Completely, totally independent from all of you. Wait. My father stepped forward, his voice carrying an unfamiliar urgency. Let's talk about this rationally. Clearly there's been some miscommunication. The communication was crystal clear, Dad. Mom told me to leave and stop being a burden. So that's exactly what I'm doing, along with every financial burden I've been carrying for this family. I reached for the door handle. Oh, and one more thing. The financial advisor I mentioned? He's also a tax attorney. He's been keeping meticulous records of every payment I've made to each of you over the years. Technically, they could be considered gifts, which means you'll be receiving some amended forms for tax purposes. Might want to check with your accountant about that. The door opened easily, cold November air rushing in and making the chandelier crystals chime softly. My car sat in the circular driveway, a luxury sedan I'd paid cash for but always parked in the back during family visits so it wouldn't draw attention. You can't just walk away from your family. My mother's voice finally broke, anger and panic mixing into something raw. After everything we've done for you. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the elaborate dining room where my family sat frozen in their expensive chairs, surrounded by their expensive things, facing an expensive future they could no longer afford. You didn't do anything for me, Mom. I did everything for you? And you just told the person funding your lifestyle to leave because I was relying on the family too much. I shook my head slowly. The irony would be funny if it weren't so pathetic. I walked to my car without looking back, my suitcase rolling smoothly across the pristine driveway. Behind me, voices erupted in conflict, my mother shrieking something at my father, Natalie's voice climbing toward hysteria, Tyler trying to interject with logical questions that no one wanted to answer. Aunt Diane's scandalized gasp carried across the yard as the full scope of the disaster became clear. The gate at the end of the driveway opened automatically, sensors recognizing my car, and I drove through without a glance at the rearview mirror. The car started with a quiet purr, the leather seats cool against my back. I programmed my condo's address into the GPS even though I knew the route by heart. The gate at the end of the driveway opened automatically, sensors recognizing my car, and I drove through without a glance at the rearview mirror. My phone started ringing before I'd reached the end of the street. My mother's name flashed across the screen. I declined the call and switched the phone to silent, watching as call after call came in: Mom, Dad, Natalie, Tyler, even Aunt Diane. Text messages began flooding in, the notification count climbing steadily. Traffic was light on Thanksgiving evening, most people still gathered with family, enjoying dessert and football and the comfortable illusion of togetherness. I drove through familiar streets, past houses decorated with autumn wreaths and harvest displays, past the park where my father used to take us to feed the ducks before his business consumed all his time and attention, past the elementary school where Natalie had been homecoming queen and I'd been the smart girl who didn't quite fit anywhere. The city skyline appeared in the distance, towers of glass and steel reflecting the sunset in shades of amber and rose. My condo building stood among them, 40 stories of modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows and amenities I'd earned through years of 70-hour work weeks and calculated risks. The doorman greeted me warmly, remembering my name, asking about my holiday with genuine interest. It was illuminating, I told him, and left it at that. My phone had accumulated 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages by the time I reached my unit. I skimmed through them while the coffee maker gurgled to life, the familiar ritual soothing my frayed nerves. Natalie's messages were predictably emotional. "You can't take the twins' college fund. That's cruel and vindictive." My father's texts were brief and commanding. "Call me immediately. We need to discuss this situation like adults." Tyler's messages showed more self-awareness. "I had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? We should talk." But it was my mother's messages that revealed the full scope of her panic. "This is a misunderstanding. I never meant you should actually leave. You're being irrational and dramatic. Call me right now. Your father is very upset. You're destroying this family. How could you be so selfish? Please call me. We can work this out." I set the phone face down on the counter and poured my coffee, adding cream and watching it swirl into clouds before settling into a perfect tan. The sunset painted my living room in shades of gold, highlighting the minimalist furniture I'd chosen, the art I collected, the life I'd built entirely on my own terms. An email appeared on my laptop from my attorney, Richard Chen, despite the holiday. He'd been copied on some of the financial arrangements and was already moving to protect my interests, saw the activity on several accounts. "Should I proceed with the changes we discussed last month? The trust can be dissolved by end of business Monday if you confirm." I typed a response, "Proceed with everything. I want complete financial separation by December 1st. His reply came within minutes, "Understood. I'll handle it personally. Are you all right?" The simple question made my throat tighten. Someone asking if I was all right, showing genuine concern rather than judgment or disappointment. I blinked away the sudden moisture in my eyes. "I will be," I wrote back. "Thank you for asking." The weekend passed in strange isolation. My phone continued its relentless buzzing, the messages growing increasingly desperate as my family began consulting their own financial advisors and discovering exactly how deep the crisis ran. My father called from a blocked number, assuming I wouldn't recognize it. I did. On Saturday morning, Natalie showed up at my building. The doorman called up, his voice apologetic. "Ms. Morrison, there's a Natalie Parker here to see you. She says she's your sister. She's quite insistent." "Tell her I'm not home," I said. "And please add her to the list of people who aren't allowed up without my express permission." "Of course, Ms. Morrison." I watched from my window as Natalie emerged onto the street, her face blotchy with tears, her designer handbag clutched like a lifeline. She stood on the sidewalk for nearly 20 minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind, before finally calling an Uber and disappearing into Saturday traffic. Sunday brought a surprise visit from Tyler and Ashley. The doorman called again, but this time his voice carried a note of sympathy. "Your brother is here, ma'am. He seems genuinely concerned, not angry. He asked if I could just let you know he'd like to talk, but he'll leave if you prefer." I considered this. Tyler had always been the neutral one, the peacekeeper who tried to avoid conflict by simply not engaging with family drama. He'd witnessed countless arguments and interventions over the years, maintaining his Switzerland status while the rest of us waged our various wars. "Send him up," I said. "Just Tyler. Ashley can wait in the lobby if she'd like." When I opened the door, Tyler stood alone in the hallway, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his casual clothes rumpled like he'd been wearing them for days. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, and he walked past me into the living room, taking in the space with obvious surprise. He'd never visited my condo before. None of them had. Family gatherings always happened at our parents' house, that neutral territory where Mom could control the environment and maintain her illusions. "Nice place," he said, moving to the windows to take in the view. "Really nice. Thank you." He turned to face me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I didn't know about any of it. The money, the company, how successful you've been. I swear to you, I had no idea. Would it have changed anything if you had?" He flinched at that. "Probably not immediately. But maybe eventually. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up at odd angles. Ashley's pretty upset with me. She figured it out about halfway through Mom's meltdown on Thursday. She kept asking why I never asked you about your life, why I never seemed interested in what you were doing. I didn't have a good answer. Because it was easier to assume I was struggling, I said. Because it made everyone else feel better about their own choices and challenges. Yeah. He sank onto my couch without asking, his shoulders slumping. Mom and Dad are in full crisis mode. Dad's accountant spent all of Friday running numbers, trying to figure out how to restructure their finances. The property taxes alone are going to force some major changes. They might have to sell the house. I poured him a cup of coffee without asking if he wanted one, adding cream and sugar the way he'd always taken it. He accepted it with a grateful nod. Natalie's husband is furious, Tyler continued. Apparently they'd been planning some major renovations based on the assumption that the twins' college was fully funded. They're looking at loans now, maybe Craig taking a second job. Natalie blames you, obviously. Of course she does. But Ashley pointed out that you didn't owe anyone those payments. You chose to help, and you chose to stop helping. That's your right. He took a long drink of coffee, staring into the cup like it held answers. I think I came here hoping you'd tell me this was all some dramatic gesture. That you'd cool off and reverse the decision once Mom apologized or something. I won't. Yeah. I'm starting to realize that. He set the cup on the coffee table, careful to use the coaster I'd slid toward him. Can I ask you something? Why did you do it? Pay for everything, I mean. If you knew how they saw you, why support them financially? I'd asked myself the same question over the weekend, sitting in this same living room, watching the city lights flicker to life as darkness fell. Because part of me kept hoping it would be enough, I admitted. That if I just helped enough, contributed enough, they'd see my value. That Mom would stop looking at me with disappointment. That Dad would be proud. That Natalie would stop needing to feel superior. That I'd finally belong in my own family. And now? Now I realize I was trying to buy something that was never for sale. Their respect, their approval, their love, it was all conditional on me playing a specific role. The struggling daughter, the cautionary tale, the one who needed fixing. I met his eyes steadily. I'm done playing that role. I'm done making myself smaller so everyone else can feel bigger. Tyler nodded slowly, something like understanding crossing his features. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have been a better brother. I should have asked questions, paid attention, actually cared about what was happening in your life instead of just showing up for holidays and assuming everything was fine. Thank you for saying that. Will you ever come back? To family things, I mean. I considered this carefully. I don't know. Maybe someday, if things change substantially. But right now, I need distance. I need to remember who I am when I'm not constantly being reminded of who they think I should be. He stood, recognizing the dismissal in my words even though I'd tried to soften it. At the door, he paused, his hand on the knob. You know what the crazy thing is? You're the most successful person in our entire family, and somehow we all convinced ourselves you were the failure. How did that happen? Because success looks different when you're a woman who doesn't follow the script, I said. No husband, no children, working in tech instead of something more traditionally feminine. It didn't fit the narrative Mom had in her head, so she rewrote my story to make sense of it. And everyone else just went along. That's incredibly messed up. Yes. It is. After Tyler left, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The anger, the hurt, the bitter satisfaction of watching their faces as the truth came out, it all crashed over me in waves. I cried for the family I'd wanted, the acceptance I'd craved, the relationships that would probably never recover from this rupture. But underneath the grief ran something stronger. Relief. Liberation. The freedom of finally being done with trying to earn love from people who decided years ago exactly who I was supposed to be. Monday morning arrived with its usual rush of activity. I returned to work with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, throwing myself into the upcoming product launch with renewed energy. My team noticed the difference immediately. Boss, are you okay? My project manager asked during our morning stand-up. You seem different. More focused. Just had a very productive Thanksgiving, I told her. Cleared out some dead weight. She laughed, thinking I meant leftovers or clutter, and I didn't correct her. Richard Chen called at noon. All accounts have been separated and closed as requested. The tax documentation is being prepared and will be mailed to the appropriate parties by end of week. Your parents' attorney reached out this morning requesting a meeting. Decline, I said. All communication goes through you from now on. And Richard? Thank you for handling this so efficiently. That's what you pay me for, he said, but his voice carried warmth. Though between you and me, I've been hoping you'd cut those ties for years. You've been too generous with people who didn't appreciate it. The truth of that statement settled into my bones, finding a home alongside all the other truths I'd finally acknowledged. Weeks passed. Christmas approached with its usual commercialism and enforced cheer. I received a formal invitation to my parents' house for the holiday dinner, delivered by mail as if I were some distant acquaintance rather than their daughter. I sent it back with a simple note, unable to attend. Best wishes for the new year. Natalie's social media presence, usually filled with carefully curated images of her perfect family, went dark after Thanksgiving. The silence spoke volumes about the financial reality they were facing. Craig had indeed taken a second job, according to Tyler's occasional updates. The twins would be attending state schools instead of the Ivy League institutions Natalie had been planning on. The renovation on their house had been indefinitely postponed. My parents listed their house in January. The market was slow in winter, but eventually a young family made an offer. Mom and Dad downsized to a condo in a less prestigious neighborhood, their country club memberships canceled, their lifestyle adjusted to match their actual income rather than the artificially inflated one I'd been subsidizing. Through it all, my phone remained silent. No apologies, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no real acceptance of responsibility. Just requests, sometimes demanding, sometimes pleading, but always requests for me to restore the financial support I'd withdrawn. I ignored them all. Spring brought unexpected developments. My company launched a new platform that exceeded all projections, sending our stock price soaring. The value increased by 40% in just 2 months, pushing my 7% stake to well over $16 million. Tech journals ran profiles on me, Forbes published an interview, local news featured a segment on successful women entrepreneurs. My mother's friends saw it. Her social circle, the same women who'd witnessed countless subtle digs about my life choices, now knew exactly how wrong she'd been. I heard through Tyler that she'd stopped attending her book club, couldn't face the garden club meetings, had withdrawn from most social engagements rather than field questions about her successful daughter. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad. On a warm afternoon in April, exactly 5 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, my doorman called up with an unusual request. Ms. Morrison, your mother is here. She doesn't want to come up. She asked if you'd be willing to meet her in the coffee shop across the street. She says she understands if you refuse. I looked at the work spread across my desk, the afternoon meetings on my calendar, all the perfectly valid reasons to say no. But something in the doorman's tone made me pause. How does she look? I asked. A brief silence. Honestly, ma'am? She looks like she's been through hell these past months. I closed my laptop. Tell her I'll be there in 10 minutes. The coffee shop was a quiet place I frequented. The baristas knew my order by heart. My mother sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She'd aged in 5 months, new lines around her eyes, gray roots showing at her part, her usual impeccable appearance replaced by something more worn and human. I ordered my usual latte and joined her at the table without fanfare. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. We sat in silence for a long moment, the coffee shop noise swirling around us, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the clink of cups against saucers. I owe you an apology, my mother finally said. A real one, not just words designed to get you to fix everything I broke. I waited. I was cruel to you on Thanksgiving. I'd been cruel to you for years before that, actually, but that day was particularly awful. And the worst part is, I did it deliberately. I wanted to hurt you, to put you in your place, because... She stopped, her voice breaking slightly. Because watching you succeed on your own terms terrified me. Why would my success terrify you? Because it meant I'd been wrong about everything. About what made someone valuable, about what constituted a successful life, about what you needed to be happy. I built this narrative where I was helping you, guiding you, trying to save you from yourself. And if you were actually thriving, if you'd been successful all along, then what did that make me? She took a shaky breath, still not touching her tea. I saw the Forbes interview. Read every word. Learned more about your life from a magazine article than I'd bothered to learn in years of actual conversation. Did you know that's what made me realize how badly I'd failed as a mother? Not the financial crisis, not losing the house, not Natalie's anger or your father's disappointment. It was reading about my own daughter's achievements from a stranger who'd spent 2 hours interviewing you and somehow understood you better than I did. My latte sat cooling in front of me, forgotten. I'm not here to ask for money, she continued. Or for you to restore anything you took away. You had every right to stop supporting us, and frankly, we should have been ashamed to accept it in the first place without even acknowledging what you were doing. I'm here because I owe you an apology that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. I'm sorry. I'm profoundly, deeply sorry for every way I failed you. The words hung between us, raw and real in a way nothing between us had been for years. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What happened on Thanksgiving wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of small cuts, constant criticism, and conditional love. I know. Her eyes filled with tears that spilled over, running unchecked down her cheeks. I know I can't fix this with one conversation. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, what I've been doing. And I'm trying to do better, to be better, even if it's too late for us. I took a sip of my latte, buying myself time to think. What would better look like? Therapy, for one thing. I started seeing someone in February. Turns out I have some pretty significant issues with control and self-worth tied up in my children's achievements. Who knew? She laughed, but it was bitter and self-deprecating. I'm working on it. On understanding why I needed you to fail so I could feel necessary. Why your success felt like a personal attack instead of something to celebrate. And Dad? Natalie? Your father is processing. He's angry, mostly at himself. Turns out when you strip away the country club and the expensive house and all the trappings he thought mattered, you're left facing some uncomfortable truths about who you actually are. He's not handling it particularly well. She finally lifted her tea, taking a small sip. Natalie is still furious with you, but Ashley's been good for Tyler. She's helping him see things more clearly, which creates some interesting dynamics at family gatherings. Do you still have those? Family gatherings? Smaller ones. Different ones. More honest ones, actually. Tyler hosts most of them now. Ashley has a gift for calling out the artificial nonsense that used to define how we all interacted. Turns out when you can't hide behind money and status, you either build something real or you have nothing at all. I studied my mother across the table, seeing her maybe clearly for the first time in years. Without the armor of her perfect house and perfect life, she looked smaller somehow. More vulnerable. More human. I can't come back to family dinners yet, I told her. Maybe not for a long time. But I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate the apology, and I believe you're trying to change. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing it for me. Because holding on to anger takes energy I'd rather spend on other things. I finished my latte, the foam leaving a thin line on the inside of the cup. Maybe we could do this again sometime. Coffee, I mean. No expectations, no demands. Just two people trying to figure out if there's a relationship worth building somewhere underneath all the rubble. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she nodded. I'd like that very much. We parted on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop, an awkward moment where neither of us knew if a hug would be welcome or appropriate. Finally, I extended my hand, and she took it, squeezing gently before letting go and walking toward her car, a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicle she used to drive. I watched her go, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation. But maybe the beginning of something that could eventually grow into understanding. The wound was still there, deep and painful, but acknowledging it felt like a first step toward healing. Months would pass before we'd meet again. A year before, I'd attend another family gathering, this time at Tyler and Ashley's house, where the dynamics had shifted into something more authentic and less performative. 2 years before, my mother and I would have a conversation that didn't carry the weight of our shared history like an anchor dragging us down. But standing on that sidewalk in April, watching my mother drive away in her economical car to her modest condo, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again when it came to my family. Hope. Maybe not for what we'd been. That was gone, shattered beyond repair on a Thanksgiving afternoon when years of resentment and misunderstanding finally came to a head. But hope for what we might build instead, if we were both willing to do the hard work of becoming people who could actually see each other clearly. I walked back to my building, nodded to the doorman, and rode the elevator up to my floor. My condo welcomed me with its clean lines and carefully chosen furnishings, a space that reflected who I actually was rather than who anyone thought I should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard Chen: secondary offering completed successfully. Your liquidated shares cleared, another 2.3 million in your account. Well done. I smiled, typing back, financial independence feels good. And it did. The freedom to build the life I wanted, to surround myself with people who valued me for who I actually was, to succeed or fail on my own terms without the weight of family expectations dragging me down, it was worth every painful step of the journey that had led me here. I'd walked away from that Thanksgiving dinner with nothing but a suitcase and my dignity. I'd lost a family I'd been trying to belong to for my entire life. But I'd gained something infinitely more valuable, myself. And that, I was learning, was more than enough.